Shay rubbed her eyes as she slowly woke up. Lights filled the room she was in, though not from sunlight, for the window that the brightness was coming from was covered in droplets of water, and it was obvious that it was still raining outside. The girl sat up in the bed she was in when she froze. When did she get in a bed? Where am I? Shay asked herself quietly. She glanced around the room, but her surroundings offered nothing to her. She didn't recognize the room she was in, or maybe she did. She wasn't sure. Okay. Think back to the last thing you remember, Shay, she murmured. I was at the Avengers compound in the building where they live, and I was watching a movie with Peter Parker, Tony Stark, and Pepper Potts. She stared off into the distance. That sounds a lot less realistic when I say it out loud. She shook her head to try to get back on track. I fell asleep during the movie, and then... She groaned and rubbed her temples. It was bright, loud. She let her eyes fly open, wrapping her arms around herself in a small hug. She murmured, I'll think about it later. Shay looked at her surroundings again, her gaze eventually landing on the window once more. Standing up, she made her way towards it, wobbling a bit before righting herself, her legs still weak from sleep. Where am I? She asked herself as she made it to the glass and peered out of it. Through the rain and water covering the window, the girl could barely make out the place she was at. The compound? I'm at the compound? Shay turned to the door. She took a few steps towards where her bag sat on the chair near the corner of the room. Digging through it, Shay quickly located her comfort clothes. Throwing on the pale blue sweater and gray jeans, Shay tossed the shoes aside, instead opting for the slippers she had stuffed in there instead. Satisfied with her soft apparel, Shay brushed out her messy brown locks into something a bit more manageable. Grinning at herself in the mirror, the girl closed her bag and made her way to the door. Placing her hands around the knob, the teenager gently turned it and allowed the door to quietly swing open. She stepped out into the hall only to be attacked with the smell of food wafting through the air, only now realizing how hungry she actually was. Shay softly closed the door behind her, hearing a lock as the side without a knob and electronic lock instead held it in place. Her feet making next to no sound because of her choice of footwear, Shay made her way down the hall, around the corner, and towards where the main living area was. She heard voices coming from the area, the kitchen probably, but they were muffled. Too muffled, especially for her. Reaching up to rub her ears, her right hand brushed against a small piece of metal behind the earlobe. Shay allowed herself to make a small "oh" shape with her lips as she realized the source of the quietness. Placing a finger on each of the devices, the girl tapped them 3 times before twisting them 90 degrees back. The device fell into her hand with a tiny click, and suddenly the world was normal again. The laughter was much more pronounced now too, but her hearing seemed to keep itself in check for the moment. Shay allowed herself a small smile to begin to move, this time her legs going faster than before as her body begged her for the food that smelled more appetizing the closer she got. Finally, Shay entered the living room. She slowed her walk and took a few more steps so that she was in view of the kitchen. The chatter died down as the occupants of the room registered her, before Pepper, who stood at the counter near a toaster, was now sitting on the granite surface. The businesswoman grinned at the girl when her mind registered the face. Shay! Pepper exclaimed as she took the 2 waffles that had just popped up. We're having frozen waffles for breakfast. Come, sit down. I have a meeting in half an hour, but I wanted to eat breakfast with you all. Her statement resulted in Shay quickly looking Pepper over to find that, sure enough, the redhead was wearing a nice white blouse and a pencil skirt. Her makeup and hair were fully done and ready for whatever professional thing she had to do. Shay made her way around the corner of the half wall that divided the kitchen and the living room and sat down on the left-end stool of the island, right next to Peter, who was seated next to Tony. Morning, Shay, Peter chirped as Pepper pushed a plate towards her. Good morning, Peter, Shay stated softly before turning her gaze to the woman in front of her. Thank you, Miss Potts. Of course, Shay. The CEO of Stark Industries then turned her attention to the other teenager. Peter, you up for a third? Peter nodded. Fast metabolism, Miss Potts, he exclaimed. Pepper laughed but delivered another fresh waffle onto the boy's plate. Peter reached over and yanked the toppings closer to him, sticking out his tongue a small bit. He squirted a mountain of whipped cream onto the waffle before drowning it in syrup. As he placed the syrup down and prepared to dig into the sugar monster he had created, Shay reached over him, plucked a cherry from the bowl, and plopped it on top of the white mound. "Thanks, Shay." Peter grinned at her. He turned back to the waffle and pressed the knife into it. The fork stuck to hold it in place.
"I have no idea how you eat that, Andrews,"
Tony stated, his voice muffled through the bite of waffle.
"Sweet stuff is nice and all, but that's a bit much." "Yes, never gonna caffeine, Mr. Fuck, and everyone will be safe,"
Peter replied, his words barely illegible through his mouth of food. "Shay, would you like anything on your waffle?" Pepper asked, her voice cutting through the boys' conversation. "I'll just have butter and syrup, Miss Potts." The woman grabbed the butter as Peter pushed the syrup to his friend. "Thank you." "Pep, don't you have to head out? You like being early for those meetings of yours," Tony observed as he checked his watch. Oh yes, thank you, darling." She rushed over to Tony and pecked him on the lips before she pressed her lips to Peter's cheek, and surprisingly, Shay's as well. "I'll see you all tonight." She turned to Shay with furrowed eyebrows as she grabbed her briefcase. "You are going to be here tonight, right, Shay?" The girl nodded before saying in a small voice, her cheeks still red, "Yes, Miss Potts, if you'll have me." Pepper laughed, throwing her head back. "We'll have you, Shay. Don't you worry about that." "Thank you, Miss Potts." "Bye, Pep," Tony called after her. "See ya, Miss Potts," Peter continued. "Have a wonderful day, Miss Potts," Shay added as the businesswoman stepped into the elevator, still smiling as the door closed. "So what are we gonna do today, Mr. Stark?" Peter questioned, turning to his mentor with a gleam in his eye. "Probably just tinker around the lab," Tony replied as he dunked another piece of his food into a blueberry mush he had on the side of his plate. "I've got to finish that one upgrade for Friday. Remember that one?" "The sympathy upgrade?" Peter guessed. "That's the one." "What's the sympathy upgrade?" Shay asked suddenly. "Mr. Stark is trying to make Friday more human now. He's upgrading her emotion by emotion," Peter answered. "He's starting with sympathy, but is having a little trouble." "Oh," Shay nodded. "Okay." "You could help me with my R2-D2 robot, Shay," the teenage boy suggested. "It's my first robot, and he's almost done. I just need to finish decorating him." He lowered his voice a moment later and asked timidly, "If you want to help, that is." "Sounds awesome, Peter," Shay grinned, her brown orb sparkling. "Cool." The two teens scarfed down the rest of their food, and though Shay knew she should probably have more to sustain herself, she said nothing, instead quietly following behind the two as they made their way to the first floor and out the door. "It's so wet out here," Peter mentioned as he swerved his path to avoid stepping in a large puddle. "That storm last night was pretty crazy," Tony stated. The two exchanged a glance, looking back in unison at Shay, who was gazing at a fallen tree on the outskirts of the forest. They turned away from her before she noticed. Tony and Peter knew that they couldn't ask her now about last night. They promised to wait until Pepper was done working. For now, they would have to wait. "Oh my God," Shay whispered as Peter scanned his ID and led her into the lab. Tony had strolled in a few minutes before them, as Shay just had to look at the random pieces of art they had around hanging in the hallway. "Look at these colors, Peter!" The billionaire sat at his desk, large screen up in front of him. He observed it and randomly changed things. Close inspection showed that the title on the top of the screen showed the words "Sympathy Upgrade" in bold letters. "You like?" Peter asked, grinning at his friend. Her eyes were wide and it looked like there were stars in her brown orbs. "Like?" "Peter, this is the coolest place I've ever been!" she exclaimed. Peter's features lit up. "I know, right? Mr. Stark's lab is awesome. I even have my own table." He pointed to a table in the corner of the room, covered in papers and random bits of technology. "I'll get you your own lab soon enough, kid." Tony waved from his seat. "Probably in the tower, though. We've got lots of room in there." My own lab?" Peter squealed, his eyes widening as he spun around to gaze at the man that was still turned away from them. "You can't be serious, Mr. Stark." "Oh, I'm dead serious, kid. You have enough projects anyways. It won't be the biggest lab, but it'll be larger than the workspace you've got now." Tony was cut off by Peter springing onto him in a hug. "Whoa, watch the work, Petey." Sorry, just..." Peter took a deep breath, a gasping sound. "Thank you, Mr. Stark. Thank you so much." Tony's lips turned upward a bit as he spun back to his work. Anytime, kid. Peter, whose cheeks were still a bright red, turned to his table in the corner where Shay was observing the R2-D2 robot that was normally tucked away underneath but was now pulled out into the open. Do you like him? Peter asked, shoving his hands into his pockets as he spoke. Does he turn on? Shay asked suddenly, spinning around to speak to the other teenager, her brown eyes blinking up at him. Yeah, he should. Peter kneeled down and flipped with the few buttons behind a panel on the back of the replica. There we go. The silver machine whirled to life, the lights on the front turning red to signal its awakening. This is so awesome, Shay whispered as the R2-D2 model began moving in circles around her, finally stopping after a few rounds to be facing right in front of her. I think he wants to say hello, Peter murmured to her. Really? He nodded. Okay, hi. Shay held out her hand a bit. I'm Shay. It's nice to meet you. R2-D2 made a few small beeps in response before sticking out a small arm in response. Shay giggled as she shook hands with the replica robot. I think he likes you, Peter grinned. Shay flashed him a smile before spinning back around to continue to play with the droid. While his friend was occupied, Peter moved back towards his mentor to look at the codes the man was making for the sympathy upgrade. What if we had one of the variables here? Peter pointed, dragging his finger to a spot in the code. That could work. Might as well try it. The billionaire nodded, tapping on the keyboard a few times and clicking the mouse twice. Alright, Friday, try it out. Download sympathy upgrade.
Downloading.
There was a momentary silence before Friday's accented voice spoke again.
Upgrade downloaded.
Great. Okay, Peter, say something sad that has happened to you, Tony directed. Well, Friday, I had to watch my uncle die when I could have saved him, Peter stated, his voice becoming a bit choked.
I'm sorry for your loss, Peter.
The AI responded, but her voice held no emotion, and she said it so quickly that it was as if it was a programmed piece of dialogue, not fitting of an AI of her caliber at all. Tony sighed. Friday, uninstall sympathy upgrade.
Right away, sir.
A moment of quiet.
Sympathy upgrade uninstalled.
Hey, Mr. Stark, wanna come to see what I was working on over here? Peter questioned. You look like you could use a break. Tony groaned but nodded. Yeah, let me see. He followed the teenager towards the corner table, where Shay no longer was. She had been led away by R2-D2 and was now roaming the lab with the droid. Nice job, Petey. Really. This project is looking... He was cut off by the sound of typing. Whirling around, Tony couldn't help but yell. What the hell are you doing? Shay jumped up from her position at the man's array of screens covered in code for Friday's sympathy upgrade. I was just, I was trying to help with the coding, cause, I made the same kind of thing for Alice, and I thought I could... Friday, Peter interrupted before Tony could continue berating the girl. Download sympathy upgrade, please. There was a pause before she responded.
Downloading.
Another pause.
Download completed.
Friday, I had to hold my uncle as he died because I couldn't save him, Peter said, less choked up than the last time because of the rushed way he said it. There was a silence before Friday responded.
I am incredibly sorry for your loss, Peter. If there is anything I can do to ease the pain of losing your uncle, then please, let me know. I hope I can help you accept the death and move on.
Her voice was much more human, causing Tony and Peter's eyes to widen, and Shay's cheeks to explode in color as they turned to her. How did you do that? Tony questioned, his voice weak. I made the same kind of code for Alice. I thought it would work on Friday. I guess it did. The girl stuttered, wringing her hands together and staring at her shoes as the chair slowly spun on its axis. See, Mr. Stark? Peter grinned, gesturing to his friend. I knew it would be a good idea to bring her. Peter, you lost so many people in your life. Oh my god. I'm not gonna lie though, I fangirled like 5 times during this fan fiction. I had to keep recording one line because I kept like giggling. I'm like, oh my god. But this was crazy. He made an R2-D2 robot. Man. I think that's the one thing that I cannot relate to as the character, because I've never watched a Star Wars movie. But, like, I want to, but, like, I haven't. Oh, my God. Okay, I got off topic. But, like, stay tuned for chapter 12. And hello, new subscribers that keep coming out of nowhere. Oh, man, y'all are amazing. And, you know, we got, like, Izuku Midoriya. Like, oh, my God, I'm a big fan. Hello. But, yeah. I hope you enjoyed the video. I think I'll be posting multiple videos this week, so stay tuned for that, too. Yeah. Bye.